He was kicked out on his 18th birthday. With his 17-year-old sister and a single duffel bag, he bought a rusted-out train depot for $6, and what they built there would change not only their lives, but the history of an entire town. If you've ever felt like you've been thrown away, or that your story was over before it even began, hit that subscribe button and stick around. This is for you. The key didn't work. Of course it didn't. It was a flimsy, generic house key, the kind you get copied at a hardware store for a couple of bucks. Our stepfather, Richard, stood in the doorway, blocking the light. He wasn't a large man, but in that moment, framed by the home we'd grown up in, he seemed enormous, a monument to the end of things. He held two new, shiny keys on a ring, dangling them from his index finger. "These are the new ones," he said, his voice flat, devoid of any emotion at all. It was the same tone he used to announce that the dishwasher was broken or that it was going to rain. A simple statement of fact. The locks were changed. We no longer belonged here. My sister, Maya, stood beside me, her arms wrapped around herself as if trying to hold her own bones together. She was 17, a year younger than me, but in her eyes was a weariness that felt ancient. The duffel bag at my feet contained everything we owned that mattered. A few changes of clothes, Maya's sketchbook, the worn photograph of our mom, and my high school diploma, which I'd received just 2 weeks earlier. It felt like a certificate from a different lifetime. "You're 18 now, Leo," Richard continued, finally looking at me. His eyes were pale, like faded denim. "You're a man. You can take care of your sister." It wasn't a suggestion. It was a command, a transfer of a burden he was gleefully shedding. 2 years. 2 years since Mom died, and he'd been counting the days. We all had, just for different reasons. I remember the silence that followed. It was thick and heavy, filled with the sound of the house we could no longer enter. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall our actual grandfather had built. Things that were supposed to be ours. Things that were now his. I didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. Arguing felt like a waste of the little energy I had left. Pleading felt humiliating. So I just nodded. I picked up the duffel bag, the strap digging into my shoulder, and took Maya's hand. Her fingers were cold. We turned and walked down the driveway, the crunch of gravel under our sneakers the only sound in the world. I didn't look back. Looking back meant admitting there was something to miss, and I couldn't afford that kind of weakness right then. We spent the first night at a bus station. The plastic seats were molded and hard, digging into our backs. The air smelled of disinfectant and despair. Maya fell asleep with her head on my shoulder, her breathing shallow. I stayed awake, watching the fluorescent lights hum and flicker, watching the lost and lonely people drift in and out like ghosts. I had $212 in my pocket, money saved from a summer job bagging groceries. It felt like a fortune and nothing at all. I counted it 3 times, the worn bills sticking to my sweaty fingers. I tried to make a plan, but my mind was a fog. The trauma of the last 2 years, culminating in this final, quiet eviction, had hollowed me out. It wasn't a sharp pain. It was a dull, constant ache, a numbness that had settled deep in my chest. I felt like a television with the static turned all the way up. All noise, no picture. The next morning, my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number from a town I'd never heard of, Havenwood. I almost ignored it, assuming it was a debt collector or a wrong number. But something made me answer. "Is this Leo Vance?" a man's voice asked. It was old, gravelly, but kind. "Yes," I said, my own voice cracking. "My name is Arthur Abernathy. I was your grandmother's lawyer." My grandmother. I barely remembered her. Mom's mom. She had died when I was 6. We'd never been close. My mom had a strained relationship with her, something about the past they never talked about. All I had was a fuzzy memory of a woman who smelled like cinnamon and soil. "Okay," I said, not knowing what else to say. "I've been trying to reach your mother for some time," he said, his voice softening with sympathy. "I'm very sorry for your loss. I read about it in the county records." County records. It made her death sound so sterile, so official. "Your grandmother, Eleanor, she left something for you and your sister. In her will. It was to be held in trust until you came of age. Your 18th birthday was yesterday, son." I sat up straighter, the hard plastic of the bench digging into my spine. Maya stirred beside me. What did she leave? I asked, my heart starting to beat a little faster. Was it money? A car? Anything that could get us out of this bus station. There was a pause on the other end of the line, the sound of papers shuffling. It's unconventional, Mr. Abernathy said carefully. She left you a property, the old Havenwood train depot, and its contents. A train depot. I pictured a grand, brick building from an old movie. Hope, fragile and unfamiliar, flickered inside me. There are some conditions, he continued. The property transfer is contingent on a purchase. For probate reasons, you have to legally buy it from the estate. She set the price herself. How much? I asked, the $212 in my pocket suddenly feeling very small again. $6, he said. I was sure I'd misheard him. I'm sorry, what? $6. 3 for you, 3 for your sister. $1 for each year she missed of your life after she passed. Those were her exact words in the codicil. I couldn't speak. It was the strangest, most heartbreaking thing I had ever heard. A transaction that was also an apology. There's also an envelope she left, Mr. Abernathy said. It's here in my office. The property taxes are delinquent, Leo. The town council has scheduled a condemnation hearing. A development company is very interested in the land. If you want this place, you and your sister need to get to Havenwood. Soon. The bus ride to Havenwood felt like a journey to another planet. We left the sprawling, indifferent suburbs behind, and the landscape slowly softened into rolling hills and farmland. Maya spent most of the trip sketching in her notebook, her pencil flying across the page, creating worlds that were safer and more beautiful than ours. I watched the power lines dip and rise, the miles of cracked asphalt spooling out behind us. $6, a train depot, an envelope. It was a puzzle with pieces I couldn't see, a story I didn't know I was a part of. We were running toward a mystery because we had nothing to run back to. We got off the bus in what seemed to be the center of Havenwood. It wasn't much of a town. A single main street with a handful of storefronts, a grocery, a diner, a hardware store, and a small office with a faded gold sign that read, Abernathy and Son, Attorneys at Law. The Son was painted over a slightly darker shade of green. Mr. Abernathy was waiting for us. He was smaller than he sounded on the phone, a man who seemed to be made entirely of tweed and wrinkles. He had kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled, which he did as we approached. Leo, Maya, he said, extending a hand. I'm Artur. I'm glad you made it. His office was a testament to a long life and a long practice. It was filled with towers of books, dusty files, and the comforting smell of old paper and pipe tobacco. He sat us down in 2 worn leather chairs that side when we sank into them. He explained the situation again, more slowly this time. The depot was on the edge of town, abandoned for 40 years. The town saw it as an eyesore, a liability. Apex Development saw it as prime real estate. Right by the old rail line, they wanted to convert into a commercial access road. The condemnation hearing was in 3 weeks. They'll vote to seize it for back taxes and sell it to Apex for pennies on the dollar, he said, steepling his fingers. Unless you can give them a reason not to, he slid a thick, manila envelope across the desk. My name was written on the front in my grandmother's spidery, elegant handwriting. She told me to give you this when you came for the keys, he said. He then produced a small, rusted iron key. It was heavy, ornate, nothing like the cheap keys Richard had dangled in our faces. It felt like a key from a fairy tale. I handed him $6 for my dwindling cash supply. He solemnly wrote out a receipt, stamped it, and pushed it back toward me. It's yours, he said, for better or worse. We walked the half-mile to the depot. The town faded away behind us, replaced by overgrown fields and the hum of insects. And then we saw it. It wasn't the grand brick building I had imagined. It was a long, low structure of weathered wood and rusting tin, half swallowed by weeds and ivy. The roof sagged in the middle like a tired old horse. The paint, once a cheerful station yellow, had peeled away to reveal the gray, splintered wood beneath. The windows were boarded up or broken, dark, vacant eyes staring out at us. A sign with most of its letters missing hung crookedly over the main entrance. HVN OD, it was a ruin. A beautiful, heartbreaking ruin. Maya stopped, her sketchbook clutched her chest. Leo, she whispered. She didn't finish. She didn't have to. It was a disaster. But it was our disaster. I walked up the creaking wooden steps of the loading platform. The iron key felt cold and heavy in my hand. I slid it into the lock on the huge, sliding freight door. It resisted, grumbled, but with a final, groaning shudder, the lock turned. Together, Maya and I put our shoulders to the door and pushed. It scraped against the rusty track, the sound echoing in the silence. And then it opened. The air that rushed out to meet us was thick with the smell of dust, damp earth, and time itself. It was the smell of forgotten things. Sunlight streamed through the gaps in the boarded-up windows, cutting bright shafts through the gloom. Dust motes danced in the light like tiny, frantic ghosts. The inside was one vast, cavernous room. A ticket counter stood against one wall, its grate rusted shut. A few broken benches lay on their sides, like fallen soldiers. The floor was covered in a thick layer of dirt and debris. Pigeons had made a home in the high rafters, and their cooing was a soft, mournful sound that echoed in the huge space. It was empty, completely empty. There were no hidden treasures, no antique furniture, just dust and decay. I felt a wave of despair wash over me. What had I done? I'd spent our last few dollars on a pile of rotting wood and rust. I'd dragged my sister to a dead end. It's big, Maya said, her voice soft. I turned to look at her. She wasn't looking at the dirt or the broken benches. She was looking up at the high, vaulted ceiling, at the way the light fell through the grime-caked windows of the cupola far above. She walked to the center of the room, turning in a slow circle. You can see the bones of it, she whispered. She pulled out her sketchbook and a piece of charcoal. In a few deft strokes, she wasn't drawing the ruin we were standing in. She was drawing what it could be. She drew light pouring in, the benches repaired, a small living space partitioned off in one corner, a studio for her art in another. She drew a home. Seeing it through her eyes, something shifted in me. The despair didn't vanish, but it made room for something else. A flicker of the same fragile hope I'd felt in the bus station. This place wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. A very, very difficult beginning. We spent the rest of the day just exploring. We found the old station master's office, a small room off the main hall. Inside was a heavy oak desk, a rusted-out wood stove, and a single, straight-back chair. Everything was covered in a shroud of dust. I ran my hand over the desk, leaving a clean streak in the gray film. It was solid, real. While Maya sketched, I sat in that dusty chair and finally opened the envelope from our grandmother. Inside were two things, a letter and a smaller, sealed envelope addressed to Maya. My letter was several pages long, filled with that same elegant, unfamiliar script. I started to read. My dearest Leo, it began. If you are reading this, then I am long gone, and you are a man. I'm sorry for so many things. I'm sorry I wasn't there to watch you grow. I'm sorry you only knew me as a ghost in your mother's stories. Your mother, my sweet Sarah, she made a choice to keep you safe, and I had to respect that, even when it broke my own heart. The letter went on to explain the story we never knew. Our grandfather hadn't just been a carpenter. He had been a partner in a local lumber business. His partner, a man named Marcus Thorne, had cheated him, forging documents to steal the company and the land it was on, leaving our grandfather with nothing. The stress and shame led to his early death. That man, Marcus Thorne, was the founder of Apex Development. The company trying to tear this depot down was built on a crime against our family. My grandmother had spent years trying to find the original partnership documents, the proof of the theft, but Thorne had hidden them well. She never gave up. She learned that Thorne had used the old depot, then already abandoned, as a temporary office and storage facility while he was setting up his stolen business. She became convinced the proof was hidden somewhere inside these walls. But by then, she was old and sick. She couldn't search herself. So she bought the depot at a tax auction, a final, desperate act. She bought it for us. She was giving us not just a shelter, but a chance at justice. A chance to reclaim what was stolen. "This depot is not a gift, Leo," she wrote. "It is a key, and it is a fortress. There is enough money hidden within its walls to pay the back taxes and survive for a year. You must find it. But more importantly, you must find the proof. Don't let that man's legacy be the final word. Your grandfather built half the homes in this town. His name was Daniel Vance. Don't let them forget it." I had to stop reading. My hands were shaking. The whole world had just tilted on its axis. We weren't just two homeless kids. We were part of a story, a battle that had started before we were even born. The dust in the air didn't feel like neglect anymore. It felt like history, like secrets. I looked around the vast, empty room. Enough money for a year. The proof. Hidden somewhere in here. It seemed impossible. The place was enormous, filled with 1,000 potential hiding spots. Where do you even begin to look? I called Maya over and read the letter aloud to her. She listened in silence, her eyes wide. When I finished, she didn't say anything for a long time. She just walked over to the grimy wall and placed her hand flat against the old wood. "Daniel Vance," she said, tasting the name. "Our grandfather, a man we'd never known, now suddenly real." "So we look," she said, her voice firm. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of intent. And so we began to search. We started in the station master's office. We tapped every inch of the walls, listening for a hollow sound. We lifted the loose floorboards, finding nothing but dirt and ancient cobwebs. We took the drawers out of the desk, checking for false bottoms. Nothing. Days turned into a week. We slept on the loading dock outside, under the stars, wrapped in the thin blankets we'd bought at the town's general store. We lived on canned soup and bread, heated over a small fire we built in a metal barrel. We were dirty, we were tired, and we were finding nothing. The hope that had ignited with the letter was starting to flicker and fade, threatening to be extinguished by the sheer, overwhelming reality of the task. The depot was huge. We were two kids with no tools and no experience. The condemnation hearing was a dark cloud looming on the horizon, getting closer every day. The people in town looked at us with a mixture of pity and suspicion. We were the vagrant kids who had taken up residence in the town's biggest eyesore. One afternoon, a sleek black car pulled up. A man in an expensive suit got out. He was older, with silver hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You must be the Vance children," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "I'm Thomas Thorne. My father was Marcus Thorne. My blood ran cold. He was the son of the man who had destroyed our family. He ran Apex Development now. I heard you'd acquired this property," he said, gesturing at the depot with a dismissive wave. "It's a sentimental gesture, I'm sure, but it's an unstable structure, a liability. My company is prepared to make you a generous offer, enough to get you a fresh start somewhere else. A nice apartment, some money for school." He named a figure that made my head spin. It was more money than I had ever imagined. Enough to solve all our problems. Enough to be safe. I looked at Maya. Her face was a mask of stone. I saw the temptation in her eyes, but I also saw the memory of our grandmother's words. "A fortress. A key. It's not for sale," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Thorne's smile tightened. "That's a mistake, son. The town council will condemn it. You'll be left with nothing. I'm offering you a lifeline when not interested," Maya said, her voice sharp. He stared at us for a long moment, his eyes cold and assessing. Then he shrugged. "Suit yourselves." He got back in his car and drove away, leaving a cloud of dust in his wake. His offer, meant to be a lifeline, felt like a threat. He was confident. He knew we'd find nothing. He knew we'd fail. That night, the despair was worse than ever. We sat by our fire, the warmth doing little to chase away the chill of defeat. "Maybe he's right, Leo," Maya said quietly, staring into the flames. "Maybe we should have taken the money. What are we even doing here? We're sleeping on a loading dock, digging through dirt. We haven't found anything. We will," I said, trying to sound more certain than I was. "Grandma said it was here." "Grandma's dead," she snapped, her voice breaking. "She's not here. We are. And we have nothing." She was right. The weight of it all pressed down on me. The responsibility for her, for this place, for this impossible quest. I felt the familiar hollowness creep back in, the static in my head growing louder. I was just a kid. I wasn't a hero in some story. I was an 18-year-old who had failed to protect his sister. I was failing her right now. I retreated into myself, the silence between us stretching, filled with doubt and fear. I couldn't sleep that night. The moon was full, casting long, strange shadows across the depot. I got up and walked back inside, the moonlight filtering through the dusty windows, painting the cavernous room in shades of silver and gray. I felt a desperate need to do something, anything. I went back to the station master's office and just stood there, breathing in the scent of old wood and dust. My eyes fell on the old wood stove in the corner. It was a big, cast-iron beast, rusted and cold. We had ignored it, assuming it was just a stove. But something drew me to it. I ran my hands over its cold surface. I opened the door to the firebox. It was filled with old ash and debris. I reached inside, my fingers digging through the soot. And then I felt it, a loose brick at the back. My heart hammered against my ribs. I pulled at it, my fingers scraping against the rough surface. It wouldn't budge. I ran outside and grabbed a crowbar we'd found in the freight room. I wedged it into the seam and pried. With a grating screech, the brick came loose. Behind it was a hollow space. And inside that space was a metal box. It was an old ammunition can, heavy and solid. It was locked. I carried it out to the loading dock, my hands trembling. Maya was awake, sitting up, her eyes wide as she saw the box. "You found it," she whispered. "We didn't have a key for this lock." Without a word, I took the crowbar and jammed it under the lid. I put all my weight on it, grunting with the effort. The metal groaned, bent, and then, with a loud snap, the lock broke. We both held our breath as I lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in yellowed cheesecloth, were stacks and stacks of cash. Old bills bundled with twine. And beneath the money was a thick, oilskin-wrapped packet. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely untie the string. Inside the packet were the documents. An original partnership agreement, signed by Daniel Vance and Marcus Thorne. Bank statements showing unauthorized transfers. And a handwritten confession from a former clerk, detailing how Thorne had forced him to forge the documents that stole the company. It was all there. The proof. We sat there in the moonlight, staring at the contents of the box. The money was life-changing. But the papers were everything. They were our history, our name, our justice. Maya started to cry, silent tears tracking clean paths through the grime on her cheeks. I pulled her into a hug, and for the first time since we'd walked down that driveway, I cried too. I cried for our mother, who had carried this secret to protect us. I cried for our grandmother, who had fought for us even after she was gone. And I cried for the grandfather we never knew, whose name we could finally clear. This discovery, it was a turning point. It changed the entire landscape of our lives. But it also brought with it a heavy choice. And I want to take a moment here because maybe you've had a moment like this in your life. A moment where everything changes, where a secret is revealed or a door is opened, and you're suddenly faced with a path you never expected. It can be terrifying. It can be overwhelming. If you've ever felt that, if this story is resonating with you, let me know in the comments. This community is for people who get it, who have walked through the fire and are looking for the way out. Your story matters. And if you're finding value in this, consider subscribing. We're in this together. Now, back to that night on the loading dock. The money was a practical miracle. We counted it under the weak beam of a flashlight. It was just over $50,000. Enough to pay the back taxes, buy food and supplies, and live for a long time while we figured things out. But the papers presented a different kind of problem. A choice. We could take the money and the documents and disappear. Start a new life somewhere else, far away from Havenwood and the Thorns. It was the safe option, the easy option. No one would blame us. Or we could stay. We could use the money to fix this place, to make it our home. And we could use the documents to fight. We could expose Thomas Thorne and Apex Development for what they were, for what his father had done. We could clear our grandfather's name. But that meant a war. A war against a rich, powerful man who practically owned the town. It was the hard path. The dangerous path. What do we do, Leo? Maya asked, her voice small. She was looking at me, her eyes trusting, waiting for me to have the answer. And in that moment, I felt the full weight of being 18, the full weight of being the one in charge. I thought about Richard dangling those shiny new keys. I thought about the indifference of the suburbs, the cold anonymity of the bus station. We had been pushed around, discarded, told we were nothing. We had a chance to stop being victims, a chance to push back, to build something instead of just running from something. "We stay," I said. The words came out with a certainty that surprised me. "We stay, and we fight." A slow smile spread across Maya's face. It was the first real smile I'd seen from her in years. It was like watching the sun rise. "Okay," she said. "We stay." The next morning, we walked into Mr. Abernathy's office and laid the money and the documents on his desk. He stared at the contents of the box, his mouth slightly agape. He picked up the partnership agreement, his old, wrinkled hands gentle with the fragile paper. He read it, then read the clerk's confession. A slow, grim smile spread across his face. "Eleanor," he whispered, shaking his head in wonder. "You magnificent, stubborn old woman. You actually did it." He looked up at us, his eyes shining. "This changes everything," he said. "This is leverage. This is power." He explained the plan. First, we'd pay the back taxes immediately, which would force the town to cancel the condemnation hearing. Second, we would file a lawsuit against Apex Development, seeking restitution for the stolen company. The documents were our ammunition. Thorne wouldn't want this to go to a public trial. The scandal would ruin him. He would be forced to settle. "He'll fight dirty," Mr. Abernathy warned us. "He'll try to intimidate you, discredit you. Are you ready for that?" We both nodded. We were terrified, but we were ready. The first step was paying the taxes. We walked into the town clerk's office with a certified check for the full amount. The woman behind the counter looked at us, then at the check, then back at us, her eyes wide with shock. The news spread through the small town like wildfire. The two homeless kids living in the depot had paid the taxes. The condemnation hearing was off the table. The next day, Mr. Abernathy served Thomas Thorne with a lawsuit. Thorne's reaction was exactly what we expected. He tried to bully us. He sent lawyers with settlement offers that were insults. He started a smear campaign in the local paper, painting us as delinquent opportunists. But we had something he didn't count on, the truth. And we had Mr. Abernathy, who fought for us with the quiet tenacity of a bulldog. While the legal battle raged, Maya and I started the real work. We started to turn the depot into a home. We used the money from our grandmother to buy lumber, tools, and supplies from the local hardware store. The owner, a gruff man named George, started out suspicious of us. But as we came in day after day, covered in dust and sweat but determined, his attitude softened. He started giving us discounts, offering advice on how to frame a wall or patch a roof. The work was brutal. We spent weeks just clearing out the decades of garbage and grime. We shoveled out layers of dirt and pigeon droppings. We tore out rotten wood and patched the holes in the roof. Every muscle in my body ached. My hands were covered in blisters and cuts. But every board we replaced, every window we cleaned, felt like a victory. It was more than just physical labor. We were pouring our grief, our anger, and our hope into the very walls of that building. We were taking something broken and forgotten and making it whole again. We were healing ourselves in the process. Maya was the visionary. She'd spend the days working alongside me, hauling lumber and hammering nails, and the evenings sketching out plans. She designed a small, efficient living space for us in the old office and baggage claim area. 2 small bedrooms, a kitchen, a bathroom. The huge main waiting room, she decided, should be something for the town. A community space, an art gallery for local artists, a place for music for gatherings, a place that gave back. People started to notice. They'd see the lights on in the depot at night. They'd see the new windows going in, the fresh coat of paint on the old sign, every letter carefully restored. Curiosity turned into support. People would drop by with food. A local electrician offered to help us with the wiring for free. A retired plumber helped us get the water running again. They had all known our grandfather. They remembered Daniel Vance. They told us stories about his kindness, his skill, his honesty. They were happy to see the Thorne family finally getting what they deserved. We weren't just the vagrant kids anymore. We were the Vance kids. We were Daniel's grandchildren. We belonged here. The lawsuit dragged on for months. Thorne's lawyers tried every trick in the book to get it dismissed, but the evidence was undeniable. Finally, facing a public trial and the ruin of his family's reputation, he folded. He agreed to a settlement. It wasn't just a sum of money, though it was substantial, a figure that guaranteed we would never have to worry about money again. It was more than that. The settlement required a public acknowledgement of the fraud his father had committed. It required the funding of a community trust in our grandfather's name, dedicated to preserving historic buildings in Havenwood. And it required that Apex Development give up any and all claims to the land surrounding the depot. We had won, not just a lawsuit. We had won back our family's name. We had won our home. The day the settlement was finalized, Maya and I stood on the newly repaired loading dock of the depot, looking out over the fields as the sun set. The building behind us was no longer a ruin. It was warm, filled with light. It was a home. It smelled of fresh paint and sawdust, not dust and decay. Grandma would be proud, Maya said, leaning her head on my shoulder. Grandfather, too, I added. I thought about the journey that had brought us here. The pain of being thrown away had led us to the place we were always meant to be. The $6 we spent was the best investment we ever made. It bought us more than a building. It bought us a past we could be proud of and a future we could build with our own two hands. We opened the main hall of the depot to the public a year after we first arrived. We called it the Daniel Vance Community Hall. The first exhibition was a collection of Maya's art, sketches and paintings of the depot's transformation from a crumbling wreck to a vibrant center of town life. The whole town came. Mr. Abernathy stood in the corner, beaming. George from the hardware store clapped me on the back. People who had once looked at us with suspicion now shook our hands and thanked us. They didn't just see a restored building. They saw that it was possible to fight back against the powerful. They saw that the past didn't have to be the end of the story. They saw that even things that seemed broken beyond repair can be saved. That night, after everyone had left, I walked through the quiet hall. The moonlight streamed through the huge, clean windows, illuminating the space. It was the same moon, the same light as that first night when I'd found the box. But everything was different. I was different. I wasn't that scared, hollowed-out kid in the bus station anymore. I had a home. I had a family, both living and gone. I had a purpose. I had learned that home isn't just a place with four walls and a roof. It's the story you build there. It's the connections you forge. It's the act of taking a broken thing and loving it enough to make it whole. It's the foundation you lay for the future, built on the truths of the past. That depot saved us, but in a way we saved it too. We gave a new life, a new purpose. We filled its empty spaces with light and laughter and community. We honored the legacy of the woman who saw it not as an ending, but as a fortress. And we reclaimed the name of the man who had laid its first foundations. The journey was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it taught me that sometimes getting kicked out is the first step toward finding where you truly belong. Sometimes the things that seem like curses are actually keys waiting for you to find the right lock. And sometimes the most valuable inheritance isn't money or property, but a story that needs to be finished and the strength to be the one to write the final chapter. And that's the real lesson here, isn't it? We all have stories. Stories of loss, of struggle, of being counted out. But those stories aren't over. You're the author of your own final chapter. If our story has given you a little bit of hope today, please consider subscribing to the channel. And I really want you to do something for me in the comments below. Tell me about a time you found strength you didn't know you had. Tell me about a place you turned into a home. I read every single comment because your stories, they matter just as much as mine. You're not alone. Thank you for listening.
Yeah, it's always great to see your name pop up. Okay. Hey, my Catalyst. Thanks so much for the likes. Appreciate it. And you too, Julie and Friend 2029. Great to see you guys. Oops, I didn't mean to pick that up. I guess that's the only problem with having this like super aesthetic farm thing is sometimes I pick up items when I don't mean to. So it's like a handful of Pokemon from each gen. I think that's pretty chill. As long as there's some people's favorites people will play. Yeah, absolutely, question mark. Well, I've been kind of surprised at like the ones they have included. I feel like there's been a couple deep cuts that I didn't really expect. Did I pick up one of these by accident? I feel like I did. Wooden fencing. I guess that back one just didn't have a panel. Okay. Also, oh my god. Hey, cat. It's good to see you. How have you been? How are you feeling? Oh my god, and hi, Ezzy. Good to see you too. Okay. Why is that stone like that? Is that normal? Weird. Okay. Somehow I got the flu right after healing. Oh my god. I need you to stop that. Have fun, Dino. I'm gonna go do some stuff. Okay, sounds good, question mark. Hope you have a great day. I can't catch a break. I'm gonna be like Bubble Boy soon. Honestly, I feel like at this rate, that's probably the safest option, right? You know, I should have brought some lumber for Scyther to cut stuff for